If you don't want to be left out, turn to page 647.
I want to make sure nobody feels left out, so I'm going to just repeat the page. 647. Well, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Just so you know that on the repeat of the Yailalais, I purposely kept my microphone off, and you're welcome. Especially when we can hear from Hannah and Minkyu and hear the ways in which we want our own instruments to work. Theirs do alongside our cantor so beautifully. Who wants to hear a voice like mine go over that? That's for sure. But I do want to say that tonight we are in for such a treat. And I have to say, don't we deserve a treat? These have been extraordinarily difficult weeks and months. So to be able to come together this evening in this way of being able to say, light for the righteous is being planted as we speak. We might not see it, but this is what we're doing by coming together and singing and being able to feel our friends at home, be able to feel our friends here in the sanctuary, and to be able to know that we together are creating this beautiful light. It is being sown. And what I love that some amazing teacher of mine shared with me, our own Rabbi Hoffman, who is with us tonight, said that of course this is the way that this psalm that we just sang has been written, that it says that the light will be sown for the righteous, and then it says, and we will reap the joy. That there could have been other ways to say this. We could have said that, whoa, the light is being sown for the righteous, and then be able to find another way to say righteous again. But instead of actually just saying righteous or light, it says, what's the point of all of this? Joy, simcha. So that's what we're doing tonight. This is not a time to wallow. This is a time to bask in joy and to create light together. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter what I say right now to open this service, because after this service, the only thing you are going to remember is Rabbi Hoffman speaking to us tonight. Those of you who have had the great gift of hearing Rabbi Hoffman speak and teach and sermonize realize that his wisdom is so vast. Just that is light and joy. But we also have another great gift tonight, and that is that our great Rabbi Max Antman, who will be joining our team in July, well, he's here with us tonight. And We also don't even have to enjoy him after we've said goodbye to Rabbi Singer. They're actually in the same sanctuary together tonight. Now, if that's not joyous, I don't know what is exactly. I like that. I hope you know you got some spontaneous applause over here, Rabbis Antman and Singer. And we have Rabbi Gelman with us and talk about someone who knows how to sow the light for the righteous. Wow. So I want us to be able to begin this service tonight with joy and with light. So as I invite all of those clergy members to join us on the bima, Rabbi Antman, Rabbi Gelman, Rabbi Singer, Rabbi Hoffman, Cantor Ben David, I also invite us to create more light in the sanctuary by introducing yourselves to each other and wishing each other a Shabbat Shalom. Page 120 is where you'll find the words for kindling the light. Rabbi Antman, would you do us the honors, please?
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
We turn now to page 123 in our Sidurim and our prayer books. And as we do so in our bodies, in our spirit, we rise. Maybe with our mentor just with you right up together. That'll be just perfect.
They practice this a lot, so.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho, ve'ahava u'ratzon yichilanu, zikaron lema'aseh b'reishit, hiu yom tehillah, lemikra'e kodesh, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim, kivanu l'charta, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodshecha, ve'ahava u'ratzon, hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha-shabbat. Amen.
L'chaim. Are you going to be like a, yes.
Okay, you let me know.
Uh, please be seated.
What an absolute honor to stand on this bima with my favorite rabbis and my favorite
I was just
cantor.
gonna,
And my favorite cantor.
that took way too long.
There is another that we are going to invite into our space, and that is the Sabbath bride. So on page 138, We're going to do verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. On that ninth verse, we will rise as if we are welcoming the Sabbath bride down the aisle. We'll rise on verse 9, welcoming the Sabbath bride down the aisle.
לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה שמור וזכור ודיבור אחד השמיענו אל המיוחד אדוני תפארת ולתהילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לקראת שבת לכו בניך כי היא מקור הברכה מעין ראש מקרן נסוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה התעוררי כי בעורך ומאורי אורי שתדברי כבור אדוני עלייך נגלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת
As we turn ahead to page 146, we find our call to worship, our Baruch Hu prayer. Page 152. be seated.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בעם בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
We turn ahead to page 158, finding our words of Mi Chamocha, the same song that we all sang. We were there, leaving Egypt together, and at the shores of the sea, we sang this song together.
Mi Chamocha, b'aylim Adonai, mi Chamocha, nedar b'kodesh, Nora, Tehillah, Osei, Ele, Nora, Tehillah, Osei, Ele, Malchutecha, Ra'ulanecha, Bokei Hayam, Lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, Ze Eli, Anu, Ve'yameru Adonai, Imlo, Leolam, Bye.
There was a report on the radio this morning, maybe some of you heard it, about a middle school that has a very particular motto. It's not one of those Latin mottos or kind of lofty mottos. The motto of this middle school is let go and move on. And the administrators explained they called middle school a mistake factory. They said in middle school, everybody's making mistakes all the time, and so we have to remind our students constantly to let go and to move on. And my thought immediately was like, well, I have to say this in Shabbat tonight, because this is not just relevant to middle school, it's really relevant to each of us in our days and in our weeks. And we come to Shabbat together to let go and to move on. Not to forget or to bury or to pass by, but to do a really intentional letting go and to say what's no longer serving us, what's not going to serve us in the coming week. So I invite all of us to let go and move on together with our Amidah. We can rise in body and in spirit. We are on page 166.
Ufi Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor, HaNorah, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Bekonei HaKol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imahot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו ואהבה מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי הכל אתה רב והושיע משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם מכלכל חיים בחסד סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו משני עפר ומידו מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישוע ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
We take time now for quiet and for breath and for personal reflection. If you're standing when you're done, please be seated.
Shalom bimromah, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imu Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imu amen. Lai 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 lai
In these services, we try to hold that joy, that beautiful Oseh Shalom, next to our heartbrokenness, next to the way that we walk through this world and see all of the suffering and feel distraught and ask ourselves, what can we do? What is there to do? Our hearts are breaking this Shabbat for all those who are suffering in Gaza, for all those who are suffering in Israel, for all those who are suffering in our home in Chicago, in our lives, our friends, and our families. And we have the chutzpah to pray for healing, to say despite all of the suffering, we're still going to pray for healing, and we're going to pray for peace. So if there's somebody you're thinking of this week whose name you'd like to share out loud, please do so as I pass my hand around the room. We turn to Mishaberach on page 371.
Mishaberach Avoteinu Makor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Mishaberach Imotenu Makor HaBracha Le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. It's an honor now to call forward Elizabeth Samuels, the president of Temple Sholem of Chicago. Elizabeth is an incredible leader with vision and the know-how to get things done, and she's learned from the best of them. There are many past presidents here in the congregation tonight, so I invite, please, will all of the past presidents please just rise for a moment for us to just appreciate you, your wisdom, what you've built, how you've been able to help us to achieve this incredible time. Thank you so much. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Shabbat Shalom. It's my honor and privilege to welcome Rabbi Larry Hoffman to be with us tonight. He is as many of you know, just a leader in our Jewish community and Jewish thought and the future of Judaism. That's really what we at Temple Shalom want to spend some time tonight really focusing on in this weekend. Lawrence A. Hoffman was ordained as a rabbi in 1969, received his doctorate in 1973, and is now professor emeritus at the New York campus of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, where he served for almost half a century. Known internationally for his lectures to popular audiences and his spiritual approach to synagogue consultation, Rabbi Hoffman has written or edited 49 books to date, including My People's Prayer Book, a 10-volume edition of the Siddur with modern commentaries, which won the National Jewish Book Award in 2007. Rabbi Hoffman served as visiting professor at the University of Notre Dame for many years and has lectured at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, the University of Southern California, and the Yale Divinity School, among other institutions. He holds honorary degrees from Gretz College and the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, and is a recipient of the Abraham Geiger Medal. In 1994, he co-founded Synagogue 2000, a trans-denominational project to envision the ideal synagogue as a moral and spiritual center for the 21st century. From 2004 to 2015, the organization, renamed Synagogue 3000, launched Next Door, a call for transformed synagogues to engage the next generation. His highly acclaimed Open Letters to My Students can be followed on his blog, Life and a Little Liturgy. It's my great privilege to welcome Rabbi Hoffman to the Bema.
So it's your choice.
Thank you. Well, we'll see what happens. No, like this is better.
Okay, I'm taking that away.
If you've got a lavalier, I'll take it.
This is what it was like at HUC. Well, this will work even better.
Thank you. Good. All mic'd up. How's that? Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Not bad. Shabbat Shalom. Much better, much better. I'm just so excited to be here. We've been planning this for a long, long time. And I feel as if this is my home away from home when I'm in Chicago. I've been here several times now, and I know many of your lay people. And one of the reasons I am here is that. I've been so impressed by the leadership of the synagogue. And when I think of great synagogues and where they will go, this is one of them, believe me. Not to mention, of course, the rabbis and the cantor whom I know. It's always wonderful to be with once upon a time students who are now teaching the world, actually, and leading the way. So I am here to help you begin to think through what's the synagogue of the future? What's it going to look like? How does a good synagogue become great? How does a great synagogue become greater still? I'm not sure what I called tonight's talk, but on the way here on the plane, I said, I got a better title, whatever it was. The title's going to be, This Is Your Life, Temple Shalom. I'm going to run through with you the history of synagogues in America, which is really the history of Jews in America, and quite a bit of it is the history of America. And before I do that, though, I want to begin way, way back and talk about how synagogues got started in the first place, because it's not what you think. Once upon a time when I was in religious school, and then when I was in rabbinic school, I got taught that there were these great people called the rabbis, and the rabbis invented a thing called the synagogue, and ever since then, the synagogue has been the central institution for the Jewish people. The last half is right. It has been the central institution for the Jewish people. But actually, synagogues were not started by the rabbis. They were started by regular people, lay people, who wanted to have community. And the purpose of synagogue was to gather together. Somewhere in the first century or so, this got started, and the rabbis came along later. Synagogues grew in huge numbers only after Christianity took over the world. And when that happened, they began planting churches. And so Jews said, oh, that's a good idea, we'll do that too. And so now synagogues multiplied, but that wasn't until the 4th century. And it may not be until the 6th century, maybe not all the way till then, when prayer became central to the synagogue. So the synagogue has had many functions. Prayer, of course, one of them, but a latecomer. Mostly, it was a place for community to gather. And here's the interesting thing. All sorts of people gathered there. It was not closed to only Jews. You didn't have to show a passport saying Jew to get in. And in fact, all sorts of people came, and many of the Jews who came had regular Greek names, like you have regularly, I have American names. Actually, in one of the early synagogues in Rome, we have a story about young men who were not Jewish at all who showed up at the synagogue. They thought that would be a good place to meet young women. If they had had prayer there already, I'm trying to figure out what would be the pickup line. Hey, Shema Yisrael, or something like that, I don't know. By the 5th century, there were Christian preachers who were telling their congregants not to go to the synagogues, which shows you that many of them did. My point is that the community was rather fluid back then. How did it become that only Jews came to synagogue? That has to do with the fact that by the Middle Ages, there were walls between the various religious communities. Jews were out there. It was a Christian society or a Muslim society. And of course, at that point, nobody was going to go back and forth at all. But the synagogue was originally a place for gathering and for studying and for debating big topics. It's where you went for entertainment. There being no phones like we have, no iPhones, and no videos, not even TV, no radio, if you remember what radio is. So where you went was a synagogue. And when prayer got started, that was really entertaining, because the Chazan was in charge, and it got made up differently every time there was a Shabbat. And you'd say, what's playing tonight? Oh, Temple Sholem, you got to go there. And people would go because they knew that religion doesn't have to be dull and insipid, and it doesn't have to be heavy. It has to be serious. It has to be joyous. It has to be community. It has to give a sense that life is worth living. And so throughout the ages, our synagogues have done just that. Now, how did synagogues then come to America? That has to do with the story of immigration. In the middle of the 19th century, German Jews came here and founded places like this, right? Let's understand why they built a place like this. The answer is Napoleon. Napoleon swept through Western Europe and freed Jews from the ghettos. But in order to make them part of society, Napoleon put it to them. He said, look, who are you? I mean, if you're your own nationality or something, there's no room for you here. But if you're willing to be a religion like Protestants and Catholics, I think then there's place for you. And then he established a large group of Jews, 70 of the wisest Jews in Europe, to be a Sanhedrin, a body to deliberate the issue and answer his question, what are you? Are you a religion or not? And they were obviously the wisest people, because it took them no time at all to decide, yes, they were a religion. The only problem was they didn't know exactly what a religion was. There was no word for it in Hebrew yet. They knew they were Am Yisrael, a people. But now, having had to say they were a religion to stay there, they had to figure out what it was. And they looked around and they saw these grand churches throughout Germany, France, and said, oh, I guess we'll do that. And the center of religion for Protestants, for Catholics, was worship. So they built places like this, generally with no place to gather outside, right? But a place where you could walk in and feel a sense of awe. Awe was a big thing in the 19th century. Awe was in. And so the rabbis came in from the side. They didn't walk through the congregation. And when you came in, you weren't expected to say, hello, good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom. The minute you walked in, you kind of shrunk into your seat, and you felt the awe. Now, that kind of synagogue worked very well in Germany. So when they came here, they built that kind of synagogue. And there were great churches around here too. They could look at the Episcopalian Church, they could look at Catholic churches. Mostly they looked at Protestant churches. And they saw big ones. And so out came the German building scheme, and this is what came out of it. They had a project. These Jews who came wanted to prove three things. They wanted to prove that they could be Jews by religion, Americans by citizenship, and still German by culture. Because they'd come from Germany with Bach and Beethoven and so on. They came here, didn't find that sort of thing. And they thought German culture would civilize America. And so they did a variety of things. First of all, they built places where the gentlemen of the time could go, like the Standard Club. And where the gentlemen of the time would talk about matters of business. Mostly, as Jews, they weren't allowed into the other clubs, so you know. But then they developed great music. And the worship service at the time was a place where most of you just listened. They got rid of the cantor who sounded too traditional. And instead they had a choir hidden somewhere where you wouldn't see them. Yes, like angels. And they sang in the key of angel, which means you can't sing along with them. But it was awesome. And even though I'm making light of it, I have the highest regard for it, because it worked. The only thing they didn't succeed in doing was keeping German culture going, because by the end of the 19th century, the German immigrants stopped coming. Their kids, second and third generation, didn't speak German anymore. They kept minutes in German. I don't know what your early minutes are, but I'll bet they're in German. In fact, the people who had come over wanted German to last until the unexpected happened. The World War broke out, the Great War in 1914. And unaccountably, Germany was on the wrong side. And that's when German disappeared. And that's when they gave up the German part. Meanwhile, as the Germans were stopping coming, a whole new group of people started arising. These were people from Eastern Europe. In 1881, huge numbers of people came in what is called the Great Migration. Not just Jews, but Italians from Southern Europe as well. So Italians and Jews mostly began arriving, but there were others, there were Poles, all sorts of people from Eastern Europe. The Jews who came from Eastern Europe were not so welcome to the Germans. The Germans looked down on them. They were strange. They didn't know from culture, which is to say they didn't speak German. And they seemed to be kind of mystical. They had these Hasidic things. They sang this stuff called nigunim, you know, la la la, da da da. That is not what Germans do. And they wanted to sing together. So the Germans had a problem. They wanted to welcome their co-religionists. They wanted to give them a place to go, a synagogue even. Just not in my backyard. The Germans had installed an organ, which is the last thing Jews in Eastern Europe wanted to hear when they went to a synagogue. So in a way, the Eastern Europeaners didn't want to go to the German synagogues as much as the German synagogues didn't want the Eastern Europeaners among them. So the German crowd decided to develop synagogues for the Eastern Europeans. They found a little seminary up on the Upper West Side of New York. They bought it. They constituted the board. They called it the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. And out of that, there emerged a new movement called the conservative movement. The conservative movement was founded by Reformed Jews, so Eastern European Jews would have some place to go. Anshe Emet is a really good example of that kind of synagogue. It was an early one. But you know what? They were founded in a day when they couldn't find a conservative rabbi. Their first rabbi was Reformed, because that's all there was here. It took a while until conservative rabbis could develop. But eventually now there were two groups of synagogues. One was very classical Reform, just like this, I described it to you, and the other one was conservative. But here's the interesting thing. The Jews who came from Eastern Europe probably would never have founded synagogues on their own. Mostly they had given up religion when they came here. Because where they came from, there was no religious reform, not like Germany. And you know why? Because Napoleon never got that far to tell them they were a religion. And so when they entered modernity, they thought they were like the Poles, like the Ukrainians. They were a national group. The only thing they didn't have was a home. And that's where Zionism came in. Jews of Western Europe, the Reformed Jews, changed religion and built synagogues like this. Jews of Eastern Europe joined the Zionist movement and helped found Israel. Those who didn't do that, those who were still in America, huge numbers, many more than the Germans, huge numbers. They probably wouldn't have bothered with synagogues at all. Except for one very interesting thing. America was a religious country. You were expected to have a place to go to worship. And so as soon as they could afford it, using rabbis from the new seminary, and sometimes with reform money, they built their own synagogues. It did not necessarily mean they would go. But they would have them, and mostly what they wanted most was a place for their children to be educated. They were really interested in traditional Judaism. Kids had to learn the traditions of Eastern Europe. Sometimes they built a regular religious school, and then they added a sanctuary later, because after all, that's what you do in America. So by the time we get to 1950 or so, there are these two types of synagogues. Now, I want to emphasize to you how little these Jews from Eastern Europe were religious. I come from New York. You will have equivalent stories here. Pardon me if I give you the famous New York one of the Lower East Side. Millions of Jews were on the Lower East Side. What do they remember from the Lower East Side? Most of the synagogues were little shtiblich, they called them, little tiny places where the people who were still Orthodox could do it. Other people didn't go. But here's what they did on the Lower East Side. Two things. If you go to the Lower East Side, you will see two buildings. The biggest building is on the corner of, and it's called Yarmolovsky's Bank. This was a Jewish community that quickly realized they had to save money to get out of the Lower East Side and get their kids a chance to become Americans. Then there's another building just a block and a half away, 2 blocks away. It is the Forwards Building, which is a center for Jewish socialism. Here's what the Lower East Side Jews managed to learn: how to make money and how to give it away. And to this day, Jews do both. So they saw their Judaism as a mixture of socialism, helping the poor, giving their money away, building a better society. And with both of these movements now, the reform from Germany and the Eastern European Jews who were conservative mostly, now you see how modern Judaism gets formed. We have awesome worship. We believe in social justice, having a better society. And we believe in education for our children and for us. And out of that amalgam became Judaism in America. Now I fast forward to the 1950s. I could call this a tale of 4 synagogues. The first one, the German one. The second one from Eastern Europe. And the third one after World War II. After World War II, we came back. America had succeeded. We had bankrupted Europe by loaning them money, and now they owed us everything. We needed a Marshall Plan to bail them out. But we had lots of money. And technology was booming. New things every day. Imagine refrigerators, cars for everybody. Cars were a big thing. You won't remember that. Does anyone remember that far back, the 1950s? Put your hand up if you remember the 1950s. All right, good to see you. All right. How many people remember the 1950s, but you won't admit it? That's another story. So, all right, those of you who remember, do you remember somebody named Dinah Shore? Oh, listen to that, they do. Do you remember what Dinah Shore sang? You got it, see the USA in your Chevrolet. Exactly. One of the most famous jingles of all time. What was she selling? Chevrolets. No, she was actually selling the Eisenhower Interstate Highway System. Eisenhower had decided that the future of America lay in cars. And so he was starting to build highway systems everywhere, for which, of course, you needed cars. That meant that people could drive and they could move to the suburbs. And so the big thing about the 1950s was suburbanization. Now, you did not have to move to the suburbs to be suburbanized. Suburbanization is a state of mind. And it had to do with all the people who had come back from the war. The women who had worked in factories during the war were sent back home while their husbands went to work. They moved far away to the suburbs. The husbands were gone all day now, couldn't come home for lunch. The women were left with kids, and lots of kids, because they were having baby boom children. And the reason they had so many children is during the war they didn't have any because their husbands were away at the war. So they got caught up in the few years after the war. And now all of a sudden, they were baby boomers. And they're called boomers because they're like the elephant in the room. They're the largest cohort ever seen in this country. They were loud. And they grew up in the really exciting times like the 60s and the 70s, when other things were happening on campus. And they left their mark. Their parents put everything into them. They had the money. They had the desire that their children would get ahead. They had a memory of going through the Depression themselves. They wanted their kids to be settled and to have enough money to make their way and go to college and so on. It's the first generation that the parents didn't just say, go play in traffic. Instead, they watched over them carefully. And they were the baby boomer children, some of them, a little bit spoiled. Synagogues of the 1950s and 60s were for the baby boomer children. Their parents were Eastern European Jews who, remember, weren't interested in religion anyway. So they built these big synagogues, mostly conservative, for the kids to be educated. And they built a new kind of synagogue never seen before in the suburbia. There was a great big school wing separate from the sanctuary. And that's where parents dropped off their kids. The sanctuary was tiny, not like this, because nobody was going. But usually there was a wall that you could open up for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because that's when people came. So that was the social hall. Because the women were all alone, they built a new kind of thing called sisterhood. So sisterhood was a big deal because it catered to the women who were stuck with the kids. And the kids were dropped off at school. And a lot of people went to services, actually, in that period of time. You have to understand how pediatric this Judaism was. Never before seen, nothing like it. Here's my example. A friend of mine remembers, he was growing up in that period. He remembers, for some reason, his parents gave him something like castor oil every night. Now, he's not sure it was castor oil or cod liver oil. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Who knows why they did it? And he hated it. It tasted awful. One day, he had a revelation. His mother was giving him this oil, see? And it suddenly dawned on him. His parents didn't take it. That was like religion. They dropped their kids off to religious school, but the parents, didn't take it. They didn't do very much at home. They just thought this is for educating the children. And so for the first time, we now are building a system where we had a synagogue training children for something their parents didn't do. And when the baby boomers grew up, they realized that religion was for kids. And as time went on, the baby boomers began leaving the synagogue, if they went at all, because it was for kids after all. We have a long way to go then in building the new kind of synagogue, a synagogue that will not be pediatric, a synagogue that will have worship that talks to people, speaks to people, engages people. You've made a huge head start here. This should not be taken for granted. A synagogue where we integrate helping people, being part of the community, and where people grow up in the synagogue, grow old in the synagogue. We're young and old. This may be the only place where many generations can meet. Doesn't happen outside very much. So all of that became clear to us in the 1990s. And that's really what Synagogue 2000 was about. As we looked at this, I and my colleagues looked at synagogues, we realized that synagogues had to become what we began to describe as moral and spiritual centers for the 21st century. Moral and spiritual centers for the 21st century. And that may sound like old hat to you by now. It really should, because you've been doing it. You have a head start on it all. But I want to think through what's coming next. So for the next few minutes, think with me, if you will, about where we are now. The world seems to be in a shambles, as we heard tonight. And you didn't have to be reminded. All of the things that we took for granted are up for grabs. New generations that think differently, if you're older, like me, or even younger than that a lot. If you're a baby boomer, you look at the new generations and you don't know what to make of them. New ideas, kind of threatening ideas sometimes. Issues like Israel and Zionism that are tearing our communities apart, sometimes by generation. What will happen in this war? What will happen to the world? A lot is going on. And yet through it all, we can see some trends. And the question is whether you face the future with hope or not. And I'm Jewish. I face the future with hope. I don't know what will happen in the war in Israel, when it will end, how it will end, but it will end. I don't know what will happen elsewhere in the world. I don't know. But I'm hopeful. And so, as you plan a synagogue of the future, the one thing we know is there are going to be Jews and there's going to be people gathering. But it's going to be different. There are two major through lines of trends at the moment. One trend is a trend towards greater individualism. The baby boomers started it when they went off to college and did whatever they did, even though their parents hated it. The next generation became more individualistic. And the individualism, sense of the self, that I want to live my life for me in my own way, that's just moved far, far apace, and there is no sign of that slowing down. We might say, but wait a second, you have to help others and so on. But the new people, the young people who are individualistic, they're actually the generation most anxious to help the world in a long time. But they want to do it in their own way. And so individualism is growing. A second thing that's happening is this breakthrough in technology. I don't have to tell you about that. But I want to remind you that Jews have always accepted technology. We're not the people who say, oh my God, there goes the world. How do I know this? Because of that prayer that you said earlier. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house, right? And the V'ahavta after the Shema. Writing was a new technology. You don't find a prayer that says, don't write. You write, memorize it. Oh no. Hey, if you can write it on the doorpost of the house. Good idea. Jews have always accepted technology. There were Jewish doctors in the Middle Ages. We've always thought about the world that God made the universe and God gave us Torah. They can't be in conflict. As we discover more about the universe, that's God's universe. Wonderful. And so I know that Jews accept technology. As the technology changes, though, technology also impacts social competence. Technological competence impacts social competence, meaning the way we get along with others, how we meet others, how many others we can meet, where we can meet them. When people began writing letters and there was a postal service, all of a sudden you could write people far away, and 2 weeks later you might get a response. Eventually came telephones, and on and on and on. But do you see how technology changes social competence? Where we are now in America is that technological competence is impacting social competence, opening up the world. We live then in a shrinking world, which will keep on shrinking and expanding our reach everywhere. And that's what's causing the polarization in our country between the people who like the idea of the world shrinking and the people who don't. But technology always wins. Never bet against technology. And so if technology is going to continue, and it'll open up vast reservoirs of opportunity for us. The world is now small. We can talk to someone all over the world. We can talk to hundreds and thousands of people if we want to. Judaism is no longer just for Jews. Think about that for a minute. First of all, 60% of Jewish marriages are now not between one Jew and another. That means that most of the children who come to our synagogue will be people who are not raised necessarily by two Jewish parents, maybe with none. Our synagogues will be filled with people who look differently. And this is one of the greatest blessings we can have. We who lost 6 million now have the opportunity of speaking to 6 million more. People who are seeking something or other and think we might have it. In their individualism, they're looking for all sorts of things. And the question is, do we have something for a new age? And the answer is, of course we do. Of course we do. By the way, do you remember how I said synagogue started? Doors were open then. It was not just for ethnic Jews. It was for anybody. We have simply returned to the way synagogues got started in the first place. After a long period of the Middle Ages, when religions were at war with one another, when we were the underdog, when we remembered how everybody hated us, and we're coming out of that period. I know at the moment there's anti-Semitism, but I do not believe that the world still hates us. I believe with hope that, in fact, vast numbers of people of goodwill come together. And I know that will happen sooner or later. And we will have people then flocking to us. And what do we need to speak to them? It depends on what kind of community we decide we want to build. It's all about the kind of community. We need a community of purpose, a reason to be, that people come here and they know why they're alive and why they should enjoy life. We need a community of profundity. I don't mean German sentences and Greek footnotes. I mean just ideas that touch people's lives. We need community of purpose for a reason to be, community of profundity, having something to say. And we need a community of passion. Passion about something to fight for. And passion about the joy of life itself. For adults, not just for children. We now see clearly that synagogues who don't have anything to say, don't have purpose, and don't have passion are disappearing. Those who have those three are going to succeed. And we will open our synagogue doors and we will speak to people with the new technology. The future is bright. I want you to remember as we go there why Judaism matters. Why will Jews manage to do this? Because we don't just speak to ethnic Jews, we speak to everybody, the way it was back in the Greek period when synagogues got started. Because we're the ones who like science, remember that? Because Judaism is not dogmatic. Even the belief in God is optional. Because Judaism believes in freedom and justice. Passover, what's the message of Passover? We were slaves in the land of Egypt. And God took us out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and now we must do that for others. Because we are a religion of joy. L'chaim, we say. To life. And yet we are deep. We do talk about God. We do talk about what life is like and what might happen after life and what it's all about and why we are alive all together. And because we are part of something bigger. We are part of something called the Jewish people, which is not an ethnic group, but is something anybody can join. If you're lonely, you want to be part of something big, something with purpose, something that stretches back to the beginning and on to the future, join us, join the Jewish people. The Jewish people is a people dedicated to God from Sinai and still here. It's a people that has a tradition of wisdom, of empathy, of hope, and of divine purpose that began at Sinai and will keep on going. And the great synagogues of the future will be the place where that keeps on going and going and going. The future is bright. You have a great synagogue. I welcome you to the future.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Hoffman. Thank you for your inspiration, and thank you for your charge to all of us for what we do next together as a community. And so tonight, as we continue to, I know in the ONEG, continue to talk about this, and then we continue to plan to work on this, tomorrow morning you'll be back here to be able to join us for our minyan and then teach us of Torah after that. And then you're going to do a retreat with our board for how we seize this vision, this time, and make sure that we are sowing the seeds of righteousness together, sowing the seeds for that future of openness and welcoming. We are still doing this, and we will learn how to do this even better through your guidance with the board at a retreat. And then the clergy, we're going to spend days with you, continuing to hone this vision together. We're looking forward to all of that. We thank you. Thank you for being a great luminary, and thank you for sharing your vision and your charge with us. Thank you. We continue our service now. On the bottom of page 586, in body and spirit, we rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
If you're standing, please be seated.
A couple of very quick announcements of upcoming events here at Sholem. Of course, tomorrow morning we are so excited to continue to learn with Rabbi Larry Hoffman. Saturday, the topic is the ever new, always changing, never easy search for God in Torah and in prayer. So I'm really looking forward to that tomorrow morning. Continuing in our week, on Sunday morning, our adult education topic is with Rabbi Michael Zedek, and he is teaching Taking Miracles Seriously, A Journey to Everyday Spirituality. That's the title of his newest book, and he's going to really speak to us about miracles and the ways that we draw from them, those daily, everyday miracles. So that should be really wonderful. That's online on Zoom at 9:30 Sunday morning. Continuing with our adult education, on Monday night, we have our Adult Education Monday Film Night, which is watching The Frisco Kid this week, and a great, great movie. And then finally, on Thursday is our Mini Solomon Book Club, which is mixed presence Thursday at 11 a.m., reading Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. So we have an exciting week coming up and really kicking off with tomorrow morning.
Thank you. I invite us to turn quickly to page 647 to see again those words for Or Zarua Lat Tzadik Ul Yishrei Lev Simcha. And I want to just point out that we begin with light, we end with joy. We begin with the righteous and we end with those who are upright. And what is connecting all of them is what is sown. So we have this word Zarua, or Zarua, light is sown for the righteous, and joy is sown for the upright. Zarua, this idea of a seed that really takes root and then blossoms, but has a lifespan. And in some ways, this lifespan is eternity. That really, in this time on earth, it's short, and yet the light that people sow in their lifetime and the joy they create in their lifetime continues as long as we know that we are passing it along. And so I know that for some of us, when we see Rabbi Larry Hoffman, we are reminded of a great luminary of ours who has passed from this earth, Rabbi Peter Noble, they were this dynamic duo here in the time when Rabbi Noble was an interim senior rabbi, and together they led us envisioning for how we are able to sow light in this synagogue. And we know that they were able to do this beautifully because they were then depending on the light that had been sown by Rabbi Fred Schwartz of blessed memory, who says that the light, the or, is really coming from Torah. And so he showed all of us in this community how to continue to pass on the light of Torah from generation to generation to generation. And we know that all of us benefited so much from luminaries from the Hebrew Union College, where we had learned how it was to not only sow light, but receive light from people like Rabbi Aaron Pankin of blessed memory, who was our extraordinary Rosh Yeshiva. And of course, this year, the death of Rabbi David Ellenson of blessed memory. We realize that it is up to us to not only keep the light of their teachings alive, but also the joy that they brought all of us. And I know for so many of us, this is how we think of our loved ones who are our teachers. They brought us joy, they brought us light, and on this Shabbat, we remember them. We remember those who recently passed from this earth. Marvin H. Silberman, Richard Sack, Saul Gantz, David Leventhal, Harvey Beam, Clinton Krislov, Dustin Jopling, Ann Goldsmith, and Andrea Deutsch. And on this Shabbat, we also mark the yahrzeit of Rosalind Altbach, Karen Goodman-Battis, Barbara Eisendrathbaum, Jan Berlin, Arnold Briskman, Vincent Edwin Chambers, Ethel Cohen, Mari Cohen, David Cups, Avraham Darshan, Aaron Dolinsky, Aaron Dolinsky, Sylvia Feldbein, Patricia Glazer, Shirl Greenfield, Lee Greenwald, Ruth Gutman, Cynthia Hartman, Jack Hers, Samuel C. Klein, Celia Levin, Jean London, Alfred J. Marks Jr., Sylvia Mashkis, Florence Miller, Rhoda Miner, Jimmy Reicherzer, Marion Rokaz, Norman Nachman Ross, Harold Rudich, Francine Schaefer, Henry Michael Schaefer, J.A. Scheinkop, Richard Tsoc, Thelma Spill, Marjorie Sticks, Samford Stoll, Bessie Ullman, Ethan Vinograd, and Florence Kales-Lease. There are others whom you are remembering on this Shabbat. I invite you to please share their name. And our Kaddish ends with those words, Oseh Shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. That we ask the God who makes peace in the high heavens, then bring peace to all of us. In this community, we not only say to all those who are part of the people of Israel, but we also say for all who dwell on earth, v'al kol yoshvei tevel. And we do this specifically to remember not only those who have died, who have been serving Israel, but we also remember all of those who are suffering and who have lost loved ones in Palestinians as well. So remember all of them in our prayers for peace in this time of memory. I invite everyone, please rise. Shemei Rabbah.
דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחיי חון וביום חון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קדושה בריחו. לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו, אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו, אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו,
אמן.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו,
So I'll invite all the clergy to join us again on the Bima. We'll turn again to page 647 for Or Zarua. I'll invite also our president. I'll invite our past presidents. I'll invite all those who work and serve at Temple Sholem. If you're willing and you're not already running to the Oneg to do anything, I invite you please to join us here. All those, I'm looking at one of them, Isabel. I don't know why you're not coming yet, but that's okay. Tal, I see you. Maureen, I'm hoping that you're here. Rachel, I see you too. Please, everyone who's part of this beautiful place. Patrick, I get that you're taking pictures. That's fair. But yes, stop taking these pictures and come on over.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.